What's going on, everybody? Curtis Wilkerson with HawgSports.com coming to you today with another episode of Hog Hoops Live. The Razorbacks are 9-1. They've had a long week of practice. They're going to look to bounce back from a tough loss to Oklahoma, which is 2 more games separating them from the start of SEC play. We're going to dive into the good, the bad, and the ugly with this team so far and get you primed up for this weekend's game in North Little Rock. All that and more coming your way on Hog Hoops Live. All right, real quick, I want to remind you of all the ways to watch or listen. Obviously, you can join us on Facebook Live. Be sure to give us a follow there. Also available on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube page. Hit that notification bell. Remember, Hog Hoops Live does have its own YouTube page where we upload all the videos as well as the live reactions, things like that following the games. Also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, you name it, wherever you like to get your podcasts. You can find us there, right where you find Hog Sports Live with Trey every week. Okay. If you do have questions or comments, try to throw them in the chat a little early today. It might be a little bit shorter of a show than normal. Just, we didn't have a midweek game. We do have a presser with Muss a little bit later this afternoon. So we'll see. We'll see if it's short or not. We'll see how much I ramble. If for some reason you feel like you need to relive that game in Tulsa last weekend, again, you can always jump on the YouTube or the podcast page and check out the live reaction I did from the BOK Center. Hey, while I think all of us, probably including the Hogs, want to move on from that Oklahoma game pretty quickly, we've had to wait a full week between games. And the team's had a long week of practice, and not only that, they've been taking final exams, so that's a rough week. Coming off a loss, you got a full week of practice. You don't usually get that during the season. You're taking final exams. Man. Look, we know Eric Musselman doesn't like to lose. He also doesn't like a lot of time between games in season. He's an NBA guy. He's used to the back-to-backs, 3 to 4 games per week. So it's kind of a bad combination for him, too. Yeah, I do think this Arkansas team's kind of in a weird spot. Muss right now, I think he's trying to play a little bit of a balancing act, right? Between making maybe some necessary tweaks and corrections, things that we've all seen without, coming across as being overreactive. I think that's tough, right? On one hand, while that Oklahoma game, it was an ugly one in many ways. We all watched it. It was just one game, the first loss of the season. So you take that into account. On the other hand, I think what's somewhat concerning about it is that, this was a game that magnified a lot of the issues that folks were seeing as this team got off to a 9-0 start. The weaknesses, maybe the chinks in the armor that they were getting away with, they were exposed, right, against a little bit better of a team. Was that a blip on the radar? Does it confirm some of the troubling trends? We're just going to have to wait to find out. I think, the question, so, what do they do? I think that's kind of what everybody's been asking throughout the course of this week. Where do they go from here? There's been all kinds of hot takes, naturally, right, on overhauling the lineup, benching guys, injecting new blood into the rotation, all that. Some I agree with, some I don't. Again, it's kind of a balancing act. You don't want to make a bunch of wholesale changes and, do anything where you kind of lose the locker room, and I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think with some of these things, it's kind of reached the point where some tweaks are necessary, and I do think that we're going to see some changes. I would love to see some other guys get more of a look. I also understand that, you can't and won't play 11 guys a night, especially as you get into league play. The thing about it is, though, I guess, is time's kind of running out, to have those opportunities before you get into those conference games, which are going to be huge. Honestly, it kind of stinks, that we're 10 games in. At this point, we don't have more of a clear idea of what this team has in a KK Robinson, a Jackson Robinson, a Trey Wade, a Kamani Johnson. I get it to a degree, though. It's like I said this on the message boards earlier. It's kind of a double-edged sword, really. You know, on one side of the blade, Muss hasn't really been able to get these guys as much run as he probably wanted to because they haven't been able to put away some of the teams on the schedule to have that luxury. They were able to do that a little bit more, I think, last year. But then, you know, in saying that, the other side of the sword there, the other side of the blade, is that they haven't been able to put these teams away, which kind of makes the calls even louder to give some of those other guys a look, right? So it's weird. And, you know, the other part of that is, you know, these guys on the outside of the rotation looking in so far haven't really taken advantage of the opportunities they have received and just fully grasped them. You know, KK earned a start at the beginning of the year. Jax had a couple games in there where he was playing 15-plus minutes per game. Trey Wade and Kamani Johnson, they had that string of games where they were coming in together for a decent rotation in the first half. But those haven't evolved into more consistent roles yet. And, you know, listen, roles can change in January and February. We saw that last year with the emergence of guys like Devo, Jalen Williams. We saw Desi, who was a starter and a key contributor, kind of resorted to more of a bench role. So those things change. I do think it's important to have a more clear picture of what you're working with before you get into league play. And so I think we're going to see some tweaks to the rotation. The question is, how far does Muss go with them? How much does he do? You know, does he make changes to the starting lineup? Does he adjust minutes for some guys to open opportunities for others? I think that's the most fascinating part of this game Saturday and then Tuesday against Elon, because after that it's Christmas break and then you're off to Mississippi State to start SEC play. It's interesting. You know, one thing I've been hearing a lot about, some buzz, some behind-the-scenes stuff, is that, you know, we could be in line to get a heavier dose of KK Robinson. That'll make a lot of people happy, right? I think it makes sense. You know, this is the team where Muss said after the Oklahoma game they are still searching for better or more consistent point guard play. You know, in that game we saw the ball movement take a dip. We know that three-point shooting has been a struggle. Hey, listen, if he's playing up to his potential, KK can help in all those areas. So, you know, I do hope to see that come to fruition this weekend. I think that'd be great. You know, JD Note, he had a rough one against Oklahoma, you know, 3 of 14 from the field. You know, there's been a lot of chatter of maybe moving him back to the six-man role. And hey, he very well may do that. We know he can thrive in that role. He's the SEC six-man of the year. He was great. I'm torn on it because I get it. I understand where people are coming from with that thought process. And again, may very well happen. If not Saturday, maybe moving forward. To me, I mean, I don't know. Is moving the second leading scorer in the SEC to the bench going to solve your problems with slow starts? It might help with some other things. It might help get him going more efficiently and consistency. But the Hogs have struggled out of the gate, so I don't know if that's the answer or not. But that's why Muss gets paid the big bucks. I'm just here to speculate, right? You know, say what you want about JD. I think he's probably your best player overall. Full body of work, you know, not just the one-game sample size. He's been one of the best on-ball defenders on the team and in the league, high up there in steals. I think he's still top 10 in steals in the country. That's pretty impressive. He's giving you nearly 5 rebounds per game. People talk about his distributing. Hey, listen, he's averaging 3.4 assists per game. That's a career high for him. Could he do more? Sure. Questionable shot selection with JD Note, to me, shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's watched any Arkansas basketball the last 2 years. I mean, you know that. You know that. With all that being said, though, I think we're kind of approaching an impasse with him in terms of his three-point shot. It's tough. You know, Note's, he's a career 34% shooter from three. That's pretty good for a high-volume guy like him. He's 27% this season. The threes keep flying, but they're not falling at a higher rate. So, you know, maybe he does need to be reined in a little bit, held more accountable for shot selection. So I don't know. What do you guys think? You want him back in that six-man role? Keep him as a starter? Who would you start in his place? Probably not Chris Likes. He's had his own set of struggles recently on both ends of the floor. We talked about KK. Give him another shot. He got a start at the beginning of the year. I don't know. Throw him in there and see what he can do with it. Like I said, I do think we're going to see more of him. So maybe that's it. We'll see. Either way, I think me personally, I wouldn't mind seeing JD's minutes at least come down some. He's playing nearly 40 a game. See those come down some. Maybe Likes gets his minutes cut a little bit until he kind of gets himself going. Maybe he needs that, little wake-up call, a little challenge. But you can do things like that and, take some from here and take some from there, and that can open up opportunities to fit somebody else into the lineup or the rotation. We talk about KK, Jackson Robinson, those guys. Maybe that gives them more of an opportunity to get established, see if they can handle it, take it from there. Going to be really interesting to see on Saturday. I think, like I said earlier, I think that's the most fascinating part of this. We do know that this team, they've got some glaring issues that they need to improve on. The biggest one offensively is certainly three-point shooting. 28.6% on the year. That's below 300 in the country out of, I think, 357 teams. Not great. And listen, do these guys shoot better than that at practice? Yes. Do you feel like they can shoot themselves out of a slump to a degree? Yes. Could shot selection be better? Yeah, of course. But all those things are true. But we now have a pretty substantial body of work, and it just hasn't been good. So how do you fix it? Again, that continues to be the question, because you have to be able to knock these down semi-consistently in league play. They don't have to burn it up, but you have to be a threat out there. You don't want teams to shrink the floor on you. We've talked about that before. But go look around the SEC, and a lot of these teams can stroke it, and you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're playing well, but you're trading twos for threes. And especially if you're struggling with three-point defense, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but it's important to be able to knock down some shots. I think, Musk can probably take some control of that by dialing up more sets and actions to get guys the shots that he wants them to take where he wants them taken. Right? If you want a catch and shoot three for Likes in the corner or whatever, run a play and execute that. He can dictate that action to a degree. So maybe we'll see a little bit more of that. Like I said, you can start holding a guy like JD Note accountable a little bit for the bad ones he takes. And, with him, you got to be careful. Same thing with Likes, I think, because part of what makes them special as players is their freedom, the ability to hit those high difficulty shots, and that puts pressure on the defense. So with that being said, though, those guys are seniors. They know the difference between good shot and bad shot. So, Muss has mentioned less off the dribble pull-ups. Those are tough. More of those catch and shoot looks. That'd be great. And then, of course, the other option would be more opportunities for players on your bench who might not be in your rotation, who you feel like can help you there. And that means they've got to bring it in practice and do all the other little things that, contribute to the team on the floor, defense, moving the ball, understanding the schemes and things like that. But, I think in terms of pure shooters that you think can connect for you at a fairly high clip, you're talking about the Robinsons, right? KK and Jax. So can you find ways to get those guys opportunities and looks, and then can they cash in and convert? I mentioned, Jackson a minute ago. He had a couple runs there where he was playing 15-plus minutes per game. Shot sure looks good, but it wasn't falling. He's 25% on the year. I think he can shoot better than that with more opportunities, but you got to get him. And again, it's that fine line of what you do as you try to figure out this rotation. It's a puzzle. It's a chess match. It's not checkers. So it's going to take a little while for them to figure it out, and they will. I have no doubt that they will. Ball movement, sharing the basketball, it's been another area that's been mentioned a lot. I'm probably less concerned about that than some, personally. Listen, it was kind of rough against Oklahoma, but before that, Arkansas had 4 games in a row where they had more than 200 passes and they shot over 50% from the field. I think those two things are connected. And they've got 3 guys in the top 20 in the SEC in assists. That kind of stuff will get better, I think, as the season progresses and guys settle in a little bit more. Biggest question there is probably at point guard. I mean, is Devo your guy at point guard, or is he better off the ball? I mean, he sure took, I think, some major strides in that direction during the homestand. He kind of reverted back into scorer mode and less of a distributor over the weekend. Is that a sign of things to come against better competition? I don't know, but it is part of the process. When Devo goes into scorer mode, and I'm not saying I don't want Devo to shoot the ball. I mean, hey, the guy can score it, but I just mean in terms of being that, that like his primary option in his mind. If you got him doing that, and you've got JD doing it, and you've got Chris doing it on the floor at the same time, you kind of have a problem, right? Guys like Au'Diese Toney almost become useless because unless they're grabbing offensive rebounds, because they get the ball and they get facilitated into the offense from the guys in the backcourt, right? So, he's still working on trying to find that balance between scoring and distributing that. Again, I keep going back to the only other option I see as kind of a facilitator who can score and defend and do all those things is KK if he's right. So if he does get increased opportunity, like we've been hearing, I really hope he takes advantage of it. I think that would be huge for the team. Who's that Jalen Tate going to be on this team? What an underrated pickup he was for Arkansas. I mean, who's the guy going to be that kind of recognizes when things are going south? He goes, he gets the ball, he gets everyone in their spots and kind of steers things back in the right direction. And I think they're still trying to figure out exactly who that is, and they'll get there. But until they do, again, maybe it's a situation where I'm sure he recognizes that, and he can, maybe he's going to start calling some more plays, some sets, and force the issue a little bit in terms of ball movement and getting the looks that he wants for the guys. I do think in the long term this is going to be a better make-a-play team than a run-a-play team, but maybe he's got to micromanage it a little bit until things start to fall into place. So that's another thing I'm going to be looking for this weekend is it going to be more open freedom, because Arkansas does kind of thrive in chaos sometimes and in transition. But when they get in those half-court sets, is he going to rely on the motion and getting those looks organically, or are we going to see him start dial up some more plays? I'd trust him either way, but I'd be all for some more plays. Toney, he shouldn't be limited to just 5 shots over the course of 2 games. You remember the sets that Arkansas ran last year, like right after the tip, every game, they'd run a set and get Justin Smith a decent post-up look? Sign me up for that with Au'Diese Toney. I really love what Arkansas has done with getting Jalen Williams the ball in the mid-post, the high post, and letting him facilitate. Need him to start firing that 3 ball a little bit more with confidence, especially if guys are going to back off of him. But, they recognize the things that work for the team and then the matchups that are favorable. So just another thing to keep an eye on. On the defensive end, yeah, I mean, certainly some things to work on. Believe it or not, I'm less concerned about the defense than I am some of the things offensively long term. I mean, 3-point defense has been rough. We can't argue that. I mean, at least, I don't know, off the top of my head, at least 3 times, opponents have hit over 13 3-pointers on Arkansas. They're shooting 37% from beyond the arc. That's a ridiculously high number. Arkansas is closing in on giving up almost twice as many threes as they've made. So that's a problem. Why is it happening? Some of it, I think guys still have some uncertainty and a lack of comfort in the scheme. And if you think about that, second guessing or hesitating by just a half second, that's a difference in someone getting an in-rhythm 3-pointer on a driving kick and someone being contested, not being able to get it off. So I think that'll get better. At some point, it's on the guys to kind of figure it out, though. I mean, again, we are 10 games in. Part of it's been containing dribble penetration. Arkansas, they're aggressive. They're a high steals team. They put a lot of pressure on the ball and in the passing lanes. So when a ball handler attacks that and gets away with straight line drives, well, what happens? Guys are over helping or they're helping late, and those kickouts become hard to get out and contest because you're scrambling. And, like I said, I think this will improve. Arkansas struggled with that last year, the dribble drive, containing penetration early, but they settled in, they figured it out. They wound up being really good to that regard come tournament time. This team's athletic enough and quick enough and veteran enough. I think that's something that they're going to get better at. I really do. Maybe I'm crazy. Bookmark this. We'll come back and check on it in a couple months. Another thing Muss has mentioned is how starting two centers, they've been starting Jalen and Connor, has maybe impacted that a little bit with the three-point defense early in games. Those guys aren't the fleetest of foot. Makes you wonder if it's contributed a little bit to some of the slow starts. I don't know. Me personally, I'd probably move Connor to more of a true backup role behind Jay Will. And that's not me bashing Connor at all and saying he should never play. I think he should. He's playing 8 to 12 minutes per game anyways, so why not start the game, with the matchups and the plan of attack that you're probably going to have for a majority of the time anyway. I don't know. Just thought. And the whole thing about it, though, is, that with all these brilliant ideas and brainstorming and tweaks to the plan and rotation, everything like that, is this game on Saturday. It's a very tricky time to try a bunch of new things. So it's going to challenge them. Folks might scoff a little bit. Hofstra. Okay. But listen, these guys are very, very dangerous. They're led by Speedy Claxton. This is a guy who played for Muss in the NBA. His first year there, he's doing a really nice job. They're not bad, all right? This is a group. They went to Houston on the road. We know how good Houston is. Took them to overtime. They went on the road to Maryland. Lost in the final seconds of the game. They went and played Iona, who's Rick Pitino coached team that beat Alabama earlier in the season, played them to a very tight ball game. So they're battle-tested coming into this one. This is one of the top three-point shooting teams in the country, honestly, in terms of, as I look at it here, makes and percentage. They've got 5 guys who can really shoot it from 3, and defending that's been a weakness of yours if you're Arkansas. So, a little bit of a concern there. Zach Cooks and Jalen Ray, those are 2 guys in the backcourt that are very talented. And listen, this is Bebe's revenge, right? Abayomi Iola, for those of you who remember him, came over from Stetson with Corey Williams. He was with Arkansas. He came over. He transferred in with Vanover and J.D. Note. He set out that year, tore his ACL over the summer, missed almost all of last season, got in, I think it was against South Carolina, and played 1 minute, and that's like his career at Arkansas. But he was really productive when he was at Stetson. He's transferred. He's at Hofstra now. He starts at center. He's shooting 76% from the field, 7.7 boards per game. Good for him. So this Hofstra game's an interesting one. Not to mention the game is in North Little Rock. It's at Simmons Bank Arena. The crowd is always rocking there. I'm really looking forward to going down and checking that out. But the games always get weird in that gym. They always do. So definitely going to be a challenge for the Hogs, who set at number 24 now in the AP poll. So they did take a drop there, but they're still in. Dropped down to number 65 in the net rankings. Again, we know that'll balance out as the year continues, assuming Arkansas wins some games, right? Hofstra's at number 113 in the net. I just took a look at KenPom. They've got Arkansas picked to win this one 83-71. So 12-point margin. I think it was like an 85-86% chance. I do think it's important to note that, Arkansas, listen, this still has a chance to be a very, very good team. And I've spent, 25 minutes or whatever talking about all the things they need to work on, and that's for the big picture, right? That's to compete, where we expected them to compete at the top of the league, do the things that we kind of expected them to do in terms of making the NCAA tournament, maybe making another run. So I think it's important to note that, right? All the goals for this team, they're all still within reach. And there's no reason to sell any long-term stock on them. They're going to be fine. I really believe that. Hey, is Arkansas as far along as they should be or as we expected them to be at this point? Absolutely not. But there's no reason to believe they're not going to hit their stride at some point here. That Musselman's teams do it every year. We talk over and over about, remember the stretch last year. They took a couple beatdowns at LSU, at Alabama, and then they kind of figured it out. Now, in fairness, Justin Smith was injured that time. They had a key piece missing. So that factored into it. But the truth is, they were in a very bad spot, a way worse spot than they are right now. And they dug out of it and figured it out. And it was because of a new sense of urgency, a relentless attention to detail, and just kind of a renewed sense of just team chemistry and coming together. It kind of brought those guys together. So hopefully we start to see some of the signs of that going into this game this weekend. Maybe that flipped the switch for them, because we've seen spurts with this team where they look really, really good. I always go back to the first half at the Hall of Fame Classic against Kansas State. They looked really, really good. That was the one time this year I looked at Arkansas and said, man, these guys could get just as far as they did last year. But we haven't seen it consistently. So maybe this flips the switch a little bit. And listen, on the plus side, there is an opportunity to stack some wins and be playing your best basketball down the stretch, which is what you want to do. There are 6 ranked teams in the SEC right now, and Arkansas plays one of them in its first 10 conference games. So they're at LSU on January 15th. That's the only one. So those first 9 of the first 10 games are against teams projected or currently in the bottom half of the SEC. So they have a chance to get off to a really nice start if they handle their business. On the flip side, that's going to be important because Arkansas does play 7 of their last 8 against Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. So it's going to come back and get them later. But hey, if Arkansas has done their job and won the games that they're supposed to up to that point, they can afford to maybe take a few losses there. But it's also an opportunity to pick up a lot of those really important quad 1 wins, improve seeding, improve your standing, and things like that. So something to consider. All right, looks like we got a few questions. Let's get into those. Hogtoon says, hello, Curtis. Hey, what's going on? Don Eldred says, no change in minutes, but have JD come off the bench, ? I think he could stand to play a little bit less. And it's tough because you don't know, as frustrating as he can be when the ball starts sticking with him, I wonder how much offense you have with him off the floor. And there's been a lot of games where you look up at the end of the night and he's played 38, 39 minutes. That's a lot for a guy who was a 6th man last year, And listen, he's worked himself into unbelievable shape. So he can handle that, but you wonder, has it affected him some? I know he was sick in Kansas City, but could that be a cause of some of the shooting woes? Maybe you back it off. Nothing crazy. 32. 33 minutes. And if you bring him off the bench if you want to. Hey, if Arkansas can get off to faster starts and then inject what Note provides off the bench like they did last year, hey, I'm all for it. I think my thing is I just want to see whoever that replacement is, and we talked about some different guys, can they come in and get things going in the right direction before JD subs into the game. So I'm not 100% opposed to that. I would be more comfortable with it if other guys who would be stepping into that spot for him were more proven. But again, moving JD Note to the bench doesn't mean benching JD Note, kind of like you're saying here. He's still going to play huge minutes, starter minutes for the team either way. Brian James Ham says, with the early signing period almost over, what needs are the Hogs targeting to complete the signing class? I'm not sure if you're talking about football or basketball. For basketball, they've got their 5 guys signed. And at this point, I think for the most part, they're looking, transfer portal at the end of the season and kind of identify the needs that they have. I think one target that didn't sign in the early period is Anthony Black. Talked about him. I talk about him, get a question about him pretty much every show. A guy who is a 5-star talent, and things have been trending towards Oklahoma State, but he hasn't signed yet, hasn't committed. So I would continue to kick the tires on that. If you're talking about football, sounds like, they're going to have, with guys entering the portal, an opportunity to fill some of those scholarships. And just listening to Danny West, who just did an unbelievable job with the early signing day content yesterday. I think a lot of that would be defensively. They would look to, add interior linemen defensively, linebacker, especially if Bumper Pool, kind of don't really know what his situation is going to be. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? And then you probably look at corner, especially if Monteric Brown elects to go to the NFL. So maybe at all 3 levels of the defense, they can make some additions there. You see me getting involved in the football talk? Let's go. Yancey Long says, Note is not the problem. I think his defensive intensity is having an effect on his shooting. Stanley has been a letdown so far. He seems to be only fully focused on scoring. Yeah, that's a decent point, actually, with Note. He does really get after it defensively, and he's still frustrating at times because he'll lose focus, and he'll get beat off ball or get caught ball watching, and then there's a kick out and his man's wide open for 3. But in terms of on-ball defense, he really gets after it, and he'll hound guys the full length of the floor and pick their pocket at half court. And that does expel energy. It's a decent point. And then on Stan, gosh, I really thought he had turned the corner. He had a couple games where I think he led Arkansas in scoring or had big scoring nights. You need that from him. But you're right, he does need to be able to do the other things. He's one of those guys who looks just a little unsure still and uncomfortable on both ends in terms of what exactly his role is offensively, and then, where he needs to be. He's one of those guys that I think hesitates a little bit and second guesses himself on defense, and that gets him burned. So I think there are some things Arkansas could do to help him settle in. Maybe, when you get him in there, and they've actually done this some, but, run a play for him, get him to his spot. They like him on that left block with that turnaround. Boom, get it and kind of settle him in right away. Defensively, he's just got to, there's something to be said for playing with freedom and confidence, and he's got to be comfortable enough with, his assignments and what Arkansas is trying to do on that end of the floor, if he's going to really settle into his role. I still think that eventually he's going to be a starter for you. The question is when. But yeah, he's done well. I mean, he's averaging nearly 10 points and 5 boards a game. But we can tell that he's not, vintage Stanley Amude yet. I think he's going to get there. Brian James Hands said, sorry, just saw this was a basketball podcast. I hope I answered your question. I tried. And then you followed with Connor came in and played solid in the second half of the OU game. Must use him more. It's so matchup dependent with Connor. And when you start him, I understand it from the standpoint of, okay, we're going to give him this first segment, see how the matchups work with him. It's always a defensive thing. Can he handle the defensive assignment? And we'll take it from there. And so that's why sometimes you see him play the first 4 or 5 minutes of the first half. You don't see him for the rest of the game. But in the matchups that he really can handle defensively, he plays a bigger role. And almost, I would say almost every time, I'm going to go back and look at this at some point, but almost every time he's able to play 15, 20 minutes per game, Arkansas wins, because when he has a matchup that he can handle defensively, he can really be a weapon for you as a rim protector and as a guy that can score, get to the free throw line. He just has an understanding and a good feel for the game. He's a good passer. I think Arkansas is better offensively in terms of ball movement and just looking the part when he's in there. So in opportunities where you can use him more, I'd love to see it. And if you can't, and it's a bad matchup, that's okay too. I mean, you've got guys, again, we talked about it. It'd be nice if we knew, what Arkansas had a little bit more in a Trey Wade or a Kamani Johnson. Can those guys help you when Vanover can't? and Jalen Williams needs a blow. What we've seen for the most part is they slide Stanley Umude down to the 5, and actually it's been kind of a mixed bag, but that helped Arkansas against Oklahoma. They were down. Jay Will is having some turnover trouble. He picked up 2 quick fouls in the second half. They slid Umude down and allows Arkansas to do some different things defensively in terms of switching all screens and stuff like that, and then it spreads the floor more on the offensive end. That's kind of when they made their run. So it'll be a mix and match thing with that. Yancey Long says, Note is getting all the minutes because at this point in the season, he's our best option. I don't disagree with that. I mean, he is the second leading scorer in the SEC, and if he was shooting a little bit better from 3, I mean, if he was shooting 30, 31% from 3 as opposed to what he is, do we have that much concern about him at this point? Probably not, with everything he's done defensively. And again, I routed off some of the numbers. He's giving you 5 boards and 3.5 assists per game too. So we understand some of the frustration that comes along with a guy that plays the way he does, but I really do think if he was just shooting slightly better, we wouldn't really be having this conversation. George Omer says, Curtis, do you ever feel Muss's emotions hurt him more than help him? Sometimes I fear he gets too irate and it hurts our team. Not really. I mean, he's an emotional guy, but the track record does speak for itself. And I know he got tossed from the game against Oklahoma. It was pretty much decided at that point. I think it was a boiling over of things. You know, they battled back and then, you know, just hit a kind of a boneheaded stretch there where it went from being down 3 to being down 15 again. The fouls, I don't think that he was probably necessarily as upset that he thought it was one-sided. It's just the nature of the way the game was called in general, really on both sides. And he just doesn't like to lose. But, you know, while maybe in the moment from time to time that could affect some of his decision-making, I think that he's just such a relentless competitor that it helps them in the long run. He was not a happy camper after that game on Saturday, and I guarantee you we see some changes and some things done differently for this next game because he's not just going to chalk it up as, you know, we talk about it some like, it's just one loss. Oh, blip on the radar. Oklahoma's never going to shoot that way again. He doesn't see it that way, and so he's going to do whatever it takes to get this team in a position to win games. That's what matters to him. He hates losing more than he loves winning. He's one of those guys. Jeremy Wilson says they don't play defense. Backdoor cuts kill us. And is basketball 101. Rotation and switching is horrible. Offense-wise, too many bus drivers and likes is selfish. Yeah, defensively, I don't think I mentioned the backdoor cuts. That is an issue. And I do think it goes back to them being really aggressive and a high steals team. If you're going to do that and put a lot of pressure on the ball and then into the passing lanes, you still got to see man and ball because that you're inviting the back door at that point. And then if you get hit with it, you're right. The rotations have to be better. And if a team is going to be switching a lot of screens, what's the number one thing with that? It's communication. That's communication. So, again, I think things that will evolve over the course of the year, but, you know, offense-wise, too many bus drivers and likes is selfish. Yeah, you know, spoke to that a little bit too. Note and likes, they kind of are what they are in terms of guys who are creators of offense and playmakers, which can be a really good thing sometimes and not so good in others. And if they're going to be on the floor together, there really has to be a balance. Because otherwise it's just pass, dribble, what can I do, force a shot. And that's what you don't want. And so that's why it's important, I think, for a particular person to step up into more of a facilitator role as a point guard. And that's going to mean sacrifice, maybe. If it's Devo, that's going to mean sacrifice from him to get everyone else involved. And it might cut into his points per game a little bit. But there is some truth to that. That's something they do have to work on. And at the same time, like I said earlier, there is a balance. You live with some of those shots from a guy like Note or a guy like Likes who's done it his whole career. But there does come a point where you have to reel it in a little bit. A bad shot every once in a while is one thing, but what kills me, I think, is the possessions where there's no pass and it's all dribble and a forced shot. If you move it around for a little bit and then you force a tough one, I can live with those. But when it gets really stagnant, that's when Arkansas really tends to struggle. Jeremy Wilson also says, football, what happened to Miles Rouser? Why didn't he sign yesterday? I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. Probably a better one for Danny. But as far as I know, he remains committed, and the plan will be for him to sign in February or whenever the next period is, if he can. That's the latest I've heard. George Omer says, Curtis, do you think part of our problem guarding the three is because Note and specifically Likes are just not tall enough? Feel like Oklahoma's guards were taller and more physical than those two. I think it's more of a problem with Likes than it is Note. I mean, there's a difference in 6'1" and 5'7", and that's something that Muss has talked about. Like, guys are going to be able to elevate and shoot over the top of you, but how can you use your leverage as a smaller player to get into a shooter and make them uncomfortable? And it's something he's working on and adjusting to. How many times has Likes fouled a three-point shooter this year? Probably more than anyone else on the team. And I think that's why he's trying to figure out how to turn a weakness into more of a strength if he can. But there's some truth to that. And honestly, Oklahoma's guards weren't that much taller. I think they went 6'1", 6'1", 6'3". And Arkansas went, when they had that lineup out there, they're 5'7", 6'1", and whatever Devo is, 6'3", 6'4". But, yeah, it impacts things. It allows guys to get more comfortable looks off unless you figure out a way, like I said, to kind of enhance that. And then George asks, what surprised you most about the loss to Oklahoma? I think the way they came out of the gates, leading up to the game, that was a very pro-Arkansas atmosphere, very pro-Arkansas crowd. They were rowdy. Oklahoma started to do the Boomer Sooner thing and run out on the floor. And the Razorback fans just interrupted it and called the Hogs, which was a ballsy, but I thought an awesome move. And I thought the team looked really hyped and energized leading up to the game. And then you get to tip-off, and all of a sudden, it's 13-0 before you can blink. And so I was surprised at how they kind of came out and got punched in the mouth the way they did. I thought it might be the other way around. And then, coming back out after the break, they had worked so hard over the course of the first half to get back in it and build a little momentum. They're only down 6. Then they get hit with an 11-2 run right out of the gate in the second half. So they got outscored, if you combine the first segments of each half, 24-2. So that's a 22-point difference. They lost by 22. So I don't know if it was just a lack of focus or intensity right out of the gates, but that surprised me. Oklahoma hitting a bunch of threes and Arkansas missing them didn't necessarily surprise me. Maybe the way Arkansas reverted back to a little more one-on-one ball after sharing the ball as well as they did during the homestand was a little surprising. But, yeah, I think the starts to each half are the two things that stood out to me the most. And George says, I asked Santa for a subscription to HawgSports. Do you think he'll give it to me? I don't know, man. I mean, it kind of depends on if you've been naughty or nice. I think that's for him to decide. If Santa is actually Trey Biddy, I could see it. He seems like the kind of guy that could guide a sleigh across the entire world over the course of a night. Right? You think Trey's that kind of guy? I think he is. We might be onto something. Why do you think we've kind of seen Tony disappear over the last few games? I'm telling you, I really think, something that Muss has said about Audi's Tony so many times is it's amazing what he's doing with Arkansas not running any plays for him. He's been so effective as a cutter, getting on the offensive glass and creating his opportunities that way, as opposed to doing it with the ball in his hands. So the Charlotte game was weird. He only got one shot in that game. He only got 4 against Oklahoma. And I think his impact on the game can be directly influenced by what the backcourt is doing. So if Devo and JD and Chris and those guys are all focused and locked in on scoring, they're not looking at him cutting as much. And teams are going to become more aware of that, and that's how Tony's making his money. So maybe he starts mixing in, with those cuts, floating back out and spotting up for those driving kick corner threes, which is a shot he can make. So a couple adjustments that he can make on his part, and maybe, Arkansas starts to run some action for him, at least early in games, to get him some good looks and kind of get him going a little bit. Because you're right, he's too valuable to this team to kind of disappear like he has the last couple games. Bobby Brown Jr. says, just telling you, I'm from the Central Arkansas area. Simmons Bank Arena will. I'm going to finish that sentence and say be rocking. I mean, it's usually a really good crowd. I've been to a couple of those games as a fan. I'm excited about it. They always turn out, so should be a pretty cool atmosphere, I would think. George says, you're killing it, Curtis. Football and basketball. Now, how do you feel about the women's soccer team season? It was a great year. Was a little disappointed. They lost in the SEC championship again. I mean, this is, 5 times in a row they've made it and haven't been able to get over the hump. They're going to get there eventually. They did good in the NCAA tournament, made it all the way to, the Elite Eight, the Final Four? I think it was the Final Eight, and lost to Rutgers. They had to travel all the way to New Jersey for that game. It's crazy, but Kobe Hell, heck of a program. Like the small ball lineup, but also think it was the reason we turned it over more. Yeah, it was just weird. Arkansas made such a run and put forth a lot of energy at a time where it was really chaotic. To cut it from, 15, 17, got it down to 3. And then there were just 3 really bad plays. It almost seemed like in a row. Chris came down with a rebound. Looked like he kind of tried to split some guys and then lost the handle there. Devo had an open floor turnover. JD lost the ball dribbling to the rim, and it tied up and went to Oklahoma. And then it was just boom, 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 and all of a sudden you're looking at a 15-point game again. I mean, it happened quick. That was crazy. Daniel Wilkerson says, you were awesome. Daniel, my man, hope you're doing well. That last name is not a coincidence. It's family. All right. I think it's a pretty good stopping point for the day today. Like I said, we do have Musselman a little bit later this afternoon, so want to get some questions ready for that. We got a lot of things to ask him, right? Just a reminder, Saturday's game against Hofstra, that's going to be at 7 p.m. Can only be listened to on the radio, no TV, as far as I know. I know it's something that irks a lot of people. Maybe that'll change. I don't know. And then Arkansas does wrap up the early non-conference portion of the schedule on Tuesday evening against Elon. They'll be back at Bud Walton Arena, and then it's off for Christmas break and then on to SEC play. So a lot going on. Exciting times. Hey, don't sell stock on these Razorbacks just yet. They're going to be just fine. Looking forward to the game on Saturday. I will probably do a little live reaction out there from Simmons Bank. We'll see what the situation looks like. At any rate, until next time, appreciate you guys as always. It's been Curtis Wilkerson with HawgSports.com. Thanks for listening.